While the Great Republic was still licking its wounds from the Great Sith War, a new threat emerged from the shadows. For the first time in 3 decades, a new force, the Mandalorians, ravaged the Outer Rim, and once again forced the Republic to war. Unlike the previous wars, the Republic didn't have one of its main allies, the Jedi Knights. During this time, one Jedi stood out amongst the rest. She was much different from many knights of her day, and could easily be defined as a great Jedi. This Jedi was named Kreia. At the height of the Mandalorian Wars, Revan and a splintered group of Jedi betrayed the Order's wishes and aided in the fight. Kreia's students were believed to be failures by the Council because they followed Revan into war, and either fell to the dark side or abandoned their training altogether. As a result, Kreia was exiled from the Order. Some believed that she had followed Revan and his Jedi to war, but she instead traced her former Padawan's footsteps, searching for an answer that she alone could provide. Eventually being drawn to the Force echoes of the Sith world Malachor V, a nexus of dark side energies and part of the ancient Sith Empire. On the surface, Kreia found Darth Revan's former stronghold, the Trace Academy, an ancient dark side paraxium that contained the deepest and most intimate secrets of the Sith. She devoured its teachings and crowned herself Darth Traya, the Lord of Betrayal. Intent in continuing her former people's legacy and determined to get revenge on the Order that betrayed her, Traya re-established the Trace Academy and went in search for wounds in the Force. One of these wounds was the man who would become Darth Nihilus. Present for the destruction of Malachor V due to the activation of the Mass Shadow Generator, Nihilus was one of the only survivors. However, he would never be the same. Trapped on the desolate world, he assumed a dark persona, grieving his losses. His emotional pain manifested as an intense hunger, and he began unintentionally draining the life of the survivors on the planet. He eventually came into contact with Darth Traya. Traya sensed him as a wound in the Force, and offered to train him to devour entire worlds to help appease his hunger at the Trace Academy. At the Academy, Nihilus became one of the top students, alongside of another powerful warrior named Darth Sion. Together the three formed the Sith Triumvirate, with each gaining a title, and Nihilus becoming the Lord of Hunger. During this time, Traya taught the Sith how to harness that hunger to make him stronger for a time, as she had promised. Nihilus consumed planets on several occasions during this time, caring only to appease his hunger. After Traya taught him what he needed, Nihilus and Sion began her removal. Disagreeing with his master's plan to eradicate the Jedi, wanting to destroy them outright, while Traya desired a more time-consuming approach, Nihilus and Sion confronted their master, and with their combined strength, severed Traya's connection to the Force, casting her into exile. The two wounds then sent an already damaged galaxy back into darkness, beginning the first Jedi Purge. The Lord of Hunger traveled the fringes of known space, destroying whatever was in his path, including the planet Qatar. After destroying the planet, Nihilus traveled to Qatar's surface, where he met the only survivor, a young Miraluka woman named Visas Mar. Training Mar as his shadow hand, the two formed a powerful bond, and in 3951 BBY, he sent Mar to capture the exiled Jedi Knight, Meetra Surik. During this time, Nihilus also set into motion civil war on Onderon, in doing so hoping to create a staging ground for the Sith, and also discovering the tomb of an ancient Sith Lord named Freedon Nad. Eventually, Nihilus would be tricked by his former master, and initiated the Battle of Telos IV. During the battle, his flagship was boarded by Mandalore the Preserver, Meetra Surik, and the redeemed Visas Mar. The three would engage Nihilus, and after a brief but intense duel, narrowly defeat the Sith Lord. Even in death, Nihilus' spirit survived the engagement, and would be discovered thousands of years later on Korriban by Darth Krayt. Believed to have been conceived by the Force, Anakin Skywalker was born to Shmi Skywalker into a life of slavery on the Outer Rim world of Tatooine. The two lived in slavery until Skywalker was discovered by Jedi Knights Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who freed Anakin from slavery and brought the boy into their community, hailing Skywalker as the chosen one of Jedi prophecy, destined to defeat the Sith and bring balance to the Force. Skywalker would be brought before the Council to determine if he were to be trained. However, despite Jinn's claim that he was the chosen one, the Council determined that Skywalker was not to be trained in accordance to the Jedi Code, Instead, they sent Jin and Kenobi back to Naboo to protect Queen Amidala and lure out their mysterious assailant. Jin and Kenobi succeeded in luring out the Sith Lord Darth Maul, and during the ensuing duel, Maul would be defeated at the hands of Kenobi. However, Jin's life would be lost. During Jin's funeral, Kenobi informed Skywalker that he would become a Jedi, determined to keep his promise to his defunct master. Despite Grandmaster Yoda's reluctance, the now Jedi Knight Kenobi took Skywalker as his Padawan learner. As a Padawan, Skywalker went on many dangerous missions alongside his master, and became the Jedi Order's brightest prospect. Skywalker would eventually be granted the title of Jedi Knight at the start of the Clone Wars. During the war, Skywalker led the Republic to countless victories, including Christophsis, Urbana, and even rescued Supreme Chancellor Palpatine during the Battle of Coruscant. However, Skywalker often struggled with his emotions, and often treaded close to the dark side. These emotions culminated when he dreamed his wife's death. Desperate to find a power to save his wife, Skywalker would be manipulated by the Dark Lord of the Sith, who was in reality the Supreme Chancellor. Sidious revealed himself to the young Jedi, who then informed Mace Windu that he was the Sith Lord they've been searching for. Windu, who went with Kit Fisto, Siasi Tin, and Akin Kolar to arrest Palpatine, left Skywalker behind. During the ensuing duel, Palpatine killed 3 of the 4 Jedi with ease, but was disarmed by Windu just before Skywalker arrived in his office. Skywalker pleaded with Windu not to kill Palpatine, saying that he should be left for the Senate to judge, but Windu felt Palpatine was too dangerous to be left alive. Windu prepared to execute the Chancellor, but Skywalker cut off his right hand, causing Windu to drop his lightsaber and allowing Palpatine to send him plummeting out of a shattered window with a blast of Force lightning. Though horrified by what he had done, Skywalker knew there was no turning back, and reluctantly pledged himself to service under his new Sith Master Sidious, who named him Darth Vader. Vader's first mission was to lead the sacking of the Jedi Temple, codenamed Operation Nightfall. Vader and the 501st Legion carried out this attack, Vader himself killing the younglings, but also Jedi Masters, most notably Sin Dralik. Vader was then sent to destroy the Separatists on Mustafar. However, Vader's former master tracked him to the fiery planet. Kenobi tried to reason with his former pupil, but Vader refused to listen, and the 2 former friends then engaged in a fierce duel, which ripped across the Separatist outpost. The duel ended on the banks of a river, where Kenobi claimed the high ground, and warned Vader not to attack. Blinded by rage and arrogance, Vader leapt to continue the duel, only to have his legs and left arm severed by his former master's blade. Miraculously, however, through his rage, he had survived, but was left terribly scarred by the fire, lost all his remaining limbs, and required a life-sustaining black suit of armor to survive. Having lost all he cared about, Darth Vader then embraced his role as the Emperor's right hand and chief enforcer for years to come. Hey guys, hope you've all been well, and to begin, I just want to apologize for the long delay. With my job this past summer and school starting again, I found it hard to create quality videos. I could have pumped out a couple videos here and there, but I just didn't like the way they were coming out, so I scrapped them all together. Speaking of scrapping a project, this contest was originally supposed to be the Sith Triumvirate versus the Rule of Two. However, due to uncertain events, that was unable to come together. Instead, I'm very proud to present my script from that video, Darth Nihilus vs. Darth Vader. I know this isn't the massive 3v3 project that was originally promised, but I hope you guys still enjoy this nonetheless, as I put a lot of time into this one since it's my first versus video in over a year. I have 3 projects in the work as of right now, so expect to see 2 more versus video in the next month and a half, including a collaboration between myself and Forklifter Matt. Again, sorry for being gone so long, and I hope you enjoyed the Lord of Hunger Darth Nihilus versus the Fallen Prodigy Darth Vader. Darth Nihilus was a human male in his late 30s or early 40s. Nihilus is an interesting combatant to analyze when it comes to his physicality. The thing with Nihilus is he lacks a true body. As he became more absorbed by the dark side, his physical body began to erode. Knowing he would succumb to death if he didn't act, Nihilus encased his spirit in his armor. This allowed the dark side to eat away at his body, while not affecting his ability to satisfy his hunger. Nihilus did use the Force to keep his robes, mask, and armor together, so he could still function like a normal being. While he didn't have a body, Nihilus still has a high level of endurance, and could battle for long periods of time as long as his hunger was satisfied. More on that later. His strength wasn't anything special, and it could easily be compared to that of an average Force user. He was also unable to be affected pain-wise, and could survive blows that would kill most other beings. The main physical handicap with Nihilus is his hunger. If this wasn't satisfied, he quickly weakened and could be disposed of rather easily.
He is a wound in the Force, more presence than flesh. And in his wake, life dies, sacrificing itself to his hunger.
At the time of his death, Darth Vader was a 45-year-old human male. As a knight, Vader was in excellent shape, and was the pinnacle of his species' physicality. However, after his defeat on Mustafar, Vader required a complete cybernetic rebuild. Deemed more machine than man by Obi-Wan Kenobi, Vader was equipped with cybernetic limbs and a respirator. All of his organs as well were replaced or modified in some way. Due to the severity of his injury, Vader's reconstruction was rushed, and because of the armor's cumbersome weight, he was forced to revise his entire fighting style. Along with new limbs, Vader received a mobile life support system encased in a suit of distinctive black armor. Vader's suit followed an ancient Sith tradition, in which warriors of the dark side would adorn themselves in heavy armor. The suit's construction also incorporated Sith alchemy to augment Vader's severely diminished physical strength and vitality. While originally a hindrance to Vader, he found the suit provided many benefits. It offered him enhanced durability and stamina, numerous sensory enhancements, and protection from extremely inhospitable environments, such as the vacuum of space. Not to mention, the suit offered Vader superhuman strength. Vader's durability was also just incredible. He has been shot, stabbed, survived the vacuum of space, took a shot from a flamethrower at point-blank range, and buried alive, yet shrugged it all off like nothing happened. Despite the armor's cumbersome weight, Vader still displayed significant showings of speed and agility. While he isn't able to move the way he did before the suit, he was still capable of speed blitzing Force wielders, as well as the occasional acrobat. While the armor does offer many benefits, the electronics in the suit were sensitive to electrical discharges. Low-level shocks would cause his prosthetics to seize up, and high-level shocks would cause his entire life support system to shut down. While Vader did add a limited amount of insulation to the suit after his duel against Galen Merrick, strong electrical discharges would still do serious damage, as shown in his duel against the Starkiller clone. This was also the direct cause of his death, as his attack on Palpatine all but destroyed his cybernetics. Despite this flaw, Vader's suit allows him to outmatch almost anyone he comes up against physically, and in most cases, would walk away unharmed. Out of all my Versus videos, this is one of, if not the strangest physical rounds I've ever had to determine. However, I still think it's very simple to call. Both Darth Nihilus and Darth Vader are damaged goods in their own way, Nihilus lacking a true body and his need for hunger, and Vader's cybernetics being the main hindrances. However, Vader has adapted to his flaws, and he's still capable of competing for long stretches of time and isn't compromised by his physical handicaps. Nihilus, on the other hand, can't say the same. Despite the fact that he may not be able to feel pain, his strength is still not on the level of Vader's, and his endurance is a huge question mark. As the fight goes longer and longer, if his hunger isn't satisfied, he weakens to the point where he is easy prey, especially for a killer like Vader. The only clear edge in my eyes Nihilus holds over Vader is his agility and dexterity, and it isn't enough to give him the edge outright. Darth Vader gets the physical edge. While Darth Nihilus is primarily a Force user, he is still a very competent lightsaber combatant. Darth Nihilus' preferred lightsaber style isn't stated in any source, and much of this round will be speculation, as we really only have his appearances in KOTOR 2 to go off of. While many believe Nihilus to be a Form 7 specialist, I have a slightly differing opinion. While I do believe Juyo to be the core aspect of the Lord of Hunger's style, I feel there is another power involved. According to Darth Traya, Nihilus' mere presence kills all around him, slowly feeding him. He also would do this in the midst of a duel, very similar to that of Jedi Master Mace Windu. But where Mace strictly fed off an opponent's dark side energy, using it against them, Nihilus would feed off of any Force energies, essentially using his opponent's own power against them. Also known as the Ferocity form, Juyo was the 7th and final form of classical lightsaber dueling. Juyo was an aggressive style, and in order to be utilized effectively, required significant internal focus by the user. With no self-control, Form 7 users lose themselves to the aggressive nature of the style. This devolves their style into nothing more than weak-minded aggressive hacking and slashing. The core element of Juyo required practitioners to allow themselves to be swept up by the Force, the thrill of combat, and fight under the guidance of controlled passions. However, to be a master of Form 7, one must master one or two other forms. It seems Nihilus favored the rare one-handed variant of Juyo. This fighting style was also employed by Darth Malak. For these reasons, I believe Nihilus mastered the second form of lightsaber combat, Makashi. Developed purely for blade-on-blade fencing, Makashi was known for its precision and efficiency, with elegant and focused blade work. The form was also based on balance and advanced footwork to outmaneuver opponents. Nihilus wielded a standard Sith lightsaber. It was similar to most lightsabers of his era, and featured an archaic design, with grooves in the center of the weapon signifying hand placement. The weapon featured a single red synthetic crystal as its focusing lens. This gave his weapon more cutting power, at the expense of maneuverability. Nihilus also wore a mask and armor. While not specifically defined, I assume it to be standard body armor that he wore under his robes. Offensively, Nihilus focused on overwhelming his opponents, quickly utilizing the strong aggressive blade work of Juyo. He also has been seen incorporating acrobatics into his sequences, unleashing devastating power attacks. Defensively, he would use the footwork of Makashi to outmaneuver opponents, which would allow him to return the offensive. As stated earlier, Nihilus would feed off his opponent, channeling his opponent's Force energies and using it against them, boosting the Dark Lord's own abilities. This could be a wild card in the fight, as if they're stalemated, that little boost could grant the Lord of Hunger an advantage. Nihilus has also been seen to incorporate Force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences, especially Telekinesis, Force Lightning, and Force Drain. This can primarily be seen in his final duel, telekinetically dominating the Jedi strike team numerous times during the fight, to where all chance of hope seemed nearly lost. Tactically, I feel Nihilus is just average. He will see most notable openings and take advantage of them, but focuses more on overwhelming his opponents outright, rather than an overall calculated approach. This makes sense, however, as Nihilus didn't have the luxury of dragging out a duel, instead needing to feed his hunger. As an overall duelist, I believe him to be quite skilled with the blade. While you could point out that he lost somewhat quickly to Meetra Surik, he was weakened after his failed attempt to drain the Jedi Force energy, and then was weakened even more after Mars severed her and Nihilus' bond. Before all of that, he was capable of matching Surik, who in my opinion is a very underrated lightsaber combatant, the reigning Mandalore, who after the fight was greatly injured to the point where he wished he would be left for dead and die, and his former apprentice, holding his own in a 3-on-1 while weakened. As an overall duelist, I would place him in a tier with Darth Malak. Malak, like Nihilus, was one of the best of his era, and could hang with just about anyone, but could be beat by elite-level swords masters. Overall, Darth Nihilus was a skilled duelist, and his unique style was unlike most had ever seen, making him quite a formidable opponent. Before his fall to the dark side, Anakin was considered to be a lightsaber prodigy, and by the end of the Clone Wars was one of, if not the greatest duelist in the galaxy. However, after his defeat to Kenobi, Vader was forced to completely remake his fighting style. His injuries and cybernetic reconstruction forced the Dark Lord to start back at square one and build his new style from the ground up. With this new style, Vader was able to negate the negative effects of his armor and use his new suit to his advantage. Much like his time as a Jedi, Vader's personalized fighting style was built off of the 5th form of lightsaber combat, Djem So. Also known as the Way of the Krayt Dragon, Form 5 was developed by practitioners of Form 3, who felt that the defensive-minded form unnecessarily extended time spent in combat by forcing its users to wait for an opportunity to strike, rather than create their own openings. Djem So was designed to use an opponent's attack against them, as seen by Djem So's emphasis on immediate counterattacks. Unlike his time as a Jedi, however, Vader wasn't relying on Form 5, instead using various techniques from all 7 forms to create his own unique hybrid style. Vader's weapon was also designed for Form 5. Deprived of his original weapon, Vader was forced to create a new one after his defeat on Mustafar. His master's own weapon served as a model, however, Vader considered his master's weapon to be an antique and sought to create a more personalized weapon. Wishing to impress his master, Vader attempted to create a novel design, but the resulting weapon was little more than a black alloy version of his original Jedi lightsaber. This weapon featured a thick, rigid hand grip, a dual-phase setting, a beveled emitter shroud, and an enlarged tilt to compensate for Vader's large hands. Originally powered by a red synthetic crystal, Vader eventually changed it with a rare crimson Adagan crystal as its focusing lens. This gave his weapon more maneuverability at the expense of cutting power. His fighting style was also built upon defending the vulnerable assets of his suit and compensate for his lack of mobility. To do this, he improved his footwork and managed to gain some decent agility. He also turned his lack of mobility into a positive, using his superhuman strength to become an immovable object and power his way through opposition. Offensively, Vader was a freight train. He used the impressive blend of economy of motion and his cybernetic strength to overwhelm his opponents. Although he was an incredibly aggressive fighter, he wasn't some savage berserker and didn't fight so mindlessly that he would leave himself open like Sora Bulk. He applied his aggressive style in a controlled, precise manner, opening and exploiting weaknesses of his opponents, and then cutting them down. He has also been shown the ability to incorporate physical strikes and force abilities into his sequences, such as a powerful kick or telekinetic blast. Defensively, the best way to describe Vader was as a wall. He utilized Form 5 Xian to deflect blaster shots, and elements of Form 3 Sarisu for blade-on-blade defense, in conjunction with the Form 5 philosophy of immediately counterattacking. Vader has also used elements of Form 2 Makashi, and has frequently been seen using a one-handed grip, with subtle moves and sophisticated blade work to parry and disarm opponents. Although against high-level duelists, he hasn't employed this technique often, if ever. Although fairly sound defensively, Vader isn't without his weaknesses, and has left himself open on multiple occasions. Whether overextending himself leaving his shoulder open, or leaving an opening allowing for a physical strike. Although these openings are far and few between, and only the best duelists have ever been able to capitalize on such openings, it is still worth noting. Vader also isn't some textbook lightsaber combatant. He is an incredibly creative and versatile fighter, who never uses the same attack more than once, and the same can be said for him defensively. He reminds me a lot of Mr. Freeze in Batman Arkham City. If you use one attack on him, he will pick up on it and counter it until it is all but useless for the remainder of the fight. He also uses his environment well, and would often throw loose debris at his foe. At the end of the day, Darth Vader was an incredibly adept duelist. His vast knowledge and unique personal style represent a challenge for even the most proficient lightsaber masters. This round is easy to determine. Both Darth Nihilus and Darth Vader are skilled power duelists. However, the way in which they attack is severely different. Nihilus is very direct and overwhelming, often attacking head-on in an attempt to break through his opponent's guard. This made sense though, as he didn't have the luxury of sitting back and letting the fight play out. On the contrary, Vader was very precise with his attacks, and didn't just blindly open himself up and start swinging. His technique was refined and well developed, giving him coverage in any situation. The same cannot be said for Nihilus. If his initial assault doesn't work, he is set back behind the 8-ball, and will need to resort to his force powers to try and end the contest. Vader is also strong enough and smart enough to match Nihilus's unique blend of footwork and power. Even if Nihilus switched up his approach, Vader has enough knowledge of all forms to be able to adapt, especially when the basis for Nihilus's style is a style he himself utilizes in Form 2. This isn't to try and say Nihilus is a bad lightsaber duelist, cause he isn't, but he doesn't have the time to come up with a full attack plan, and if that first plan doesn't work, he is in serious trouble. At the end of the day, Darth Vader is just more technically sound and brings more to the table as a lightsaber combatant. Darth Vader gets the edge. Darth Nihilus was one of the most potent users of the dark side in galactic history. Nihilus' former apprentice Visas Marr even believed Nihilus to be the embodiment of death. His master Darth Traya even went on to say that he was so powerful in the Force that only planets and stars, not people, demanded his attention. Like all Force wielders, Nihilus was able to use the Force to augment his physical attributes, and paired it with Force Rage, using his anger and pain to boost his own speed, strength, and ferocity. Nihilus was also a master of telekinesis, capable of performing Force pushes, shoves, and grips with relative ease. A favorite of the Dark Lord was Force Slam, where he would telekinetically lift them in the air and throw them around like a rag doll. During his confrontation with the Exile, Nihilus was able to push the Exile, Marr, and Mandalore across the bridge of his flagship with a mere gesture. He was even capable of lifting Star Destroyer-sized vessel from the extreme gravity vortex of the mass shadow generator from Malachor 5. Beat that, Galen Merrick. Nihilus also was able to use telekinesis to create Force Whirlwinds. Force Whirlwind was a more advanced form of Force Push, and a rather feeble version of Force Wave. The user would alter the air currents around an opponent, turning it into a maelstrom. This swirling force would lift an opponent into the air, spin them around, and leave them incapable of moving out of it. Also proficient in Force Wound, Nihilus was capable of telekinetically causing spasms in the lungs and other organs of his targets, painfully injuring them. That being said, surprisingly he wasn't capable of Force Crush like his master Darth Traya. Nihilus was also very skilled in Force-based strangulation, and was very skilled in the use of Force Choke. This became a favored method of torture for the Lord of Hunger. One of Nihilus' more obscure abilities was Force Scream, where he amplified his voice, letting out an enraged scream, causing damage to anyone unfortunate enough to be in its proximity. That being said, combatively, it didn't have much use, as most Force wielders were capable of shielding themselves against such an attack. As was the case with other Sith of his era, Nihilus was a practiced hand in Force Stun, effortlessly stunning the Exile and her companions with a wave of a hand. Nihilus can also use Force Slow, slowing his targets as if they are encumbered by an extremely heavy load, making it difficult for them to move. He took this ability to the nth degree, employing Force Plague, which worked as a fast-acting toxin, horribly debilitating his opponents. As is the case with many Sith Lords, Nihilus was a master of Force Lightning, capable of unleashing destructive energy from his fingers. Though the overall power of his lightning is unknown, it's most likely devastating, in my opinion on par with Darth Bane's application. As a telepath, Nihilus was very strong, and was more than capable of telepathic communication, calling Visas Marr from across the galaxy. Nihilus also favored mind manipulation, dominating the minds of the weak-minded. Capable of Force Fear, he was able to strike directly at the deepest parts of the target's mind, causing his opponent to cower defenselessly. While it is stated that Nihilus is capable of creating Force illusions, the power and effect of these illusions are unknown. Perhaps his most deadly power, Darth Nihilus was a master at Sever Force. This intended to be an attack with irreversible consequences, severing an individual's connection to the Force. Nihilus was able to strip his master Darth Traya of her connection to the Force. However, this ability's combative viability is questionable. The Lord of Hunger was also able to cheat death, perfecting the art of essence transfer. As stated earlier, he encased his consciousness within his armor, allowing him to continue to live and affect the physical realm without becoming a formless entity. Nihilus' most powerful accolade was his use of Force Drain. Force Drain rekindled Force energy in the user, offensively draining the Force energy from those whom the power was turned upon. Nihilus owned this power, where he was not only able to drain the Force from an individual, but from entire planets. This was Nihilus' most dangerous ability, and combatively, Nihilus had no difficulty incorporating this attack into his sequences. Overall, Darth Nihilus was a master of the dark side, and his combative application of the Force was second to none.
The extent of his power cannot be put into words, and his perceptions have grown as well. To him,
You are dust motes in a storm, a grain upon the beach, and as insignificant as a body that orbits the graveyard of Malachor.
Darth Vader possessed the highest Force potential ever in galactic history, even surpassing that of Jedi Grandmaster Yoda. After his defeat on Mustafar, Vader would never see this potential realized, as his lack of body tissue hindered the Force's ability to flow through him. Still, he was considered to be 80% of Darth Sidious's power, resulting in a being still very powerful in its use of the Force. Like all Force wielders, Darth Vader was able to use the Force to augment his physical attributes. He primarily focused on his speed and agility, as his suit's inherited traits already boosted the Dark Lord's strength. Much like Darth Krayt, he paired this with Dark Rage, giving him even more focus and precision. A master of telekinesis, Vader was an outright freight train in its application. He was more than able to rip through the shields of other Force wielders, and even manifested Force waves, capable of incredible destruction. Moving large objects was also an ease for the Sith Lord, and can be seen doing this in both of his duels against the Starkiller clone and his son Luke Skywalker. Vader's favorite use of telekinesis was his use of Force Choke. He has been able to use this ability on multiple foes at once, and much like Nihilus, became a favored method of torture. Vader was also very fond of the Lightsaber Throw ability, and unlike most credited with this feat, actually employed it in the midst of combat. As a telepath, he was also not lacking. He took the Jedi mind trick to its highest levels, able to probe the minds of unwilling foes, and even able to communicate over long distances. The Beast Control ability was also in the Dark Lord's skill set, in which Vader could calm and tame beasts, or in extreme cases, control entirely. Unlike most Sith Lords with his level of power, Vader was not able to use Force Lightning. Due to the extensive cybernetic augmentations in his body, as well as the presence of the electronics in his suit, any attempt by Vader to generate Force Lightning would carry the great risk of causing these systems to short-circuit, possibly to deadly effect. He did, however, have skill in the Force Lightning variant Kinetite. Kinetite involved molding Force-energized lightning into a sphere of restrained kinetic energy, which could be thrown at an enemy. Although impressive, Vader has only employed such an attack in the presence of the Force-enhancing Kyber crystal. The novel The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader even states that he was only able to do this due to the crystal, and something he normally cannot use. The same can be said about his use of Sith sorcery. Although able to transform a prisoner into a Rakghoul monster, he was only able to do so in the presence of the powerful Sith artifact, the Myr Talisman. Defensively, Vader was very adept, and was a master in the use of Telekinesis. This ability allowed the user to deflect an oncoming attack, usually projectiles and blaster bolts. While masters of this ability can also deflect Force Lightning and even lightsabers, Vader is not able to do so. Vader is also able to resist the influences of Force Drain, as he was taught this technique by Ulic Qel-Droma on Renvar during the events of the Clone Wars. Although the magnitude of the drain he can defend against is unknown, he was able to resist the power of the Dark Reaper, which could drain armies of their life force. He also has never been seen using this ability as a Sith Lord, but I doubt he wouldn't be able to. Another strength for Vader was the way in which he employed his use of the Force. Unlike many traditional Sith warriors who focused on brute strength, Vader acted more like a Dooku, in which his use of the Force was calculated and minimalist, rather than overwhelming with blind power. Although he will never reach his true potential, Darth Vader was still an incredibly gifted Force wielder. Despite not being able to use many of the traditional Sith powers, he took what he had and negates the power of his opposition. By doing so, becoming an even more dangerous combatant. Much like the first two rounds, I think this one is easy to determine. But nonetheless, let's break it down. Both combatants use the Force in very direct and punishing ways. In terms of telekinesis, both possess incredible strength, able to ragdoll Force wielders, and knock back entire armies with a mere gesture. The way in which they employ this ability is also dead even, as stated earlier, in very direct and overwhelming ways. But this is where the similarities just about end. As for Vader, telekinesis is just about all he has. Nihilus, on the other hand, has Force Whirlwind, Force Scream, Force Wound, and Force Stun just for starters. And while Force Whirlwind and Scream may not be very effective, if effective at all against Vader, he still can at least call upon them if needed. Vader also has no answer for Force Wound and Stun, although I doubt these would do serious damage to the Sith, maybe slow his movement for a second, or cause a slight pain in his organs. These would just be an annoyance for Vader, and in my eyes, not debilitating. Nihilus's lightning, on the other hand, if it connects, could very well be a difference maker, causing his suit to shut down and ultimately kill him. Vader does not have any defense against this except for his lightsaber, as he's only been seen using Telekinesis against blaster bolts. That being said, it isn't the end-all if he is hit by it once or twice, as I feel to kill him with Force Lightning, Nihilus would have to deliver sustained bolts for a decent amount of time, as it took prolonged exposure from Sidious's lightning to kill him. And I think it's safe to say Sidious's application of this ability is above the Lord of Hungers, and just about everyone else. Now we get to what you've all been waiting for, Nihilus's Force Drain. Against most foes, this ability ends the fight instantly, but not necessarily in this case. While many claim Vader to be immune to such attacks, this isn't the case, as he can merely resist the influences of Force drain. The Dark Reaper drained the Force energies from moons, and it also drained armies of Jedi. While impressive, when we compare it to Nihilus' use of Force drain, it isn't nearly as powerful, but not by much. The final aspect to consider here is Vader resisted the Dark Reaper as a Padawan. By the time he was crowned a Sith Lord, his mastery of the Force grew to tremendous levels, and we can infer that his understanding and use of resisting Force drain would have grown as well, leading me to believe that he can somewhat defend himself against such an attack. At the end of the day, however, Nihilus brings more to the table as a combative Force wielder, and has many tools he can use of to dispose of his victims. Darth Nihilus gets the edge. And now, we've reached the verdict. Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place on the Forest moon of Endor, right outside the shield generator, with the victor winning a solid 7 out of 10 times. The two would cross paths, and before the blades could even be drawn, Nihilus reaches out with the Force and attempts to drain Vader. Vader is caught off guard and hit by this power, but unlike many of Nihilus' victims, Vader can adapt. The Dark Lord begins to rise, resisting the attack. Nihilus stops as Vader makes his way back to his feet and is weakened. The early fight here would primarily be Force-based. Nihilus would almost certainly look to drain, but little does he know that Vader has a slight defense. Nihilus still wins the early fight, as if Vader isn't ready, Nihilus can almost certainly take him down. He would also be able to keep Vader at bay, not allowing him to advance. This all changes in the mid-fight, however, as if Nihilus can't get a one-hit with the drain, he will be forced to draw his blade. The mid-fight would be a battle of swordsmanship. Nihilus unleashes a Force scream, his rage building, as his desire to feed grows. The two exchanging blow for blow. Nihilus would hold the early advantage, his aggression and unorthodox version of Juyo on full display. While Nihilus would dictate the early portion of the mid-fight, he would not necessarily be gaining much ground, nor landing many big shots. Instead, Vader sits back and analyzes his foe's moves. Realizing that Nihilus has become overly aggressive, Vader lands a Force push, sending Nihilus across the forest. Before the Lord of Hunger has time to react, however, Vader is on top of him, pushing him back and attacking with incredible power and efficiency. Vader holds the edge in the mid-fight, as he alone is the only one capable of ending the contest purely on martial might. While Nihilus does incorporate Force attacks into his sequences, he often doesn't until he absolutely has to, as shown in his fight with Surik. The end fight is where things get very dangerous for Nihilus. As this fight progresses, the worse he gets, and his need to feed intensifies. Realizing Vader's getting the better of him, Nihilus sends a Force wave at Vader, knocking him back. This time, Nihilus attacks, but now incorporating different elements into his sequences. No longer just aggressively throwing his blade, but a conjunction with Force lightning and Force drain. He sends a blast of lightning at Vader as he begins to push forward. Vader catches it with his blade and redirects it to a nearby tree. He begins to throw more power behind his shots, sensing his foe is starting to weaken. Nihilus parries one of these attacks and reaches out to drain it once more. Once again, he is only partially successful, with Vader resisting the brunt of the attack once again. But Nihilus' attacks are lessening. Vader realizes this, and his aggressive blade work is slowing down, and the drain is nowhere near its original power. One more time the Lord of Hunger aims to feed, but this time, as he reaches out, Vader cuts his hand off, before swinging his blade and decapitating him. After a second, red lightning fills the air over Nihilus' body, and Darth Vader walks away victorious. To me, this contest does not take long, and is over in no more than 10 minutes. The fight in my eyes also comes down to the early fight. If Nihilus lands a Force drain before Vader can realize what was hitting him, it's his fight. But unfortunately for him, Vader has only felt this power once before, and is likely able to pick up on it. The real question is, can he defend himself against the drain, and as stated in the previous section, I believe he can to an extent. The longer this contest goes on, and the more Nihilus has to use his saber to try and end the fight, the more the contest leans in Vader's favor. Against most foes, Nihilus can drain his way to unanimous decision, but unfortunately for him, he's fighting one of the few men as broken and twisted as he is. I declare Darth Vader, the Fallen Prodigy, the victor. Oh, I'm sure the comments are going to be good on this one. But with that, I hope you all enjoyed this latest episode of my Versus series. Once again, I apologize for this taking so much time, but expect to see some new videos sooner rather than later. If you're new here, please like and subscribe, and check out some of my other Versus videos such as Count Dooku vs. Kip Durin. Once again, I thank you all for watching, and as always, take care.